statements given to the Select Committee, but evidence, as it would appear, that led your closest and trusted aide over many years, Les Hinton, to give misleading evidence. Do you find that a satisfactory state of affairs?
No, I do not.
And what do you think the company should do about it in a follow-up to this Select Committee inquiry?
Well, Mr. Chapman, who was in charge of this, has left us. He had that report for a number of years, and it wasn't until Mr. Lewis looked at it carefully that we immediately said we must get legal advice, see how we go to the police with this, how we should present it, etc.
Okay. To be clear, my understanding is that the file was with the lawyers, it was with the law firm, and there would have been no reason to go and re-look at it. Again, the opinion of it was very, very clear based on the review that was done. And as soon as it was in a new criminal investigation, it was deemed appropriate to look at. It was immediately done so.
Mr. Murdoch, you either haven't grasped the point or you're not reading your own newspapers in the form of the Sunday Times. My final question, Mr. Murdoch. Given the picture that's been painted of individuals on a news desk acting as gatekeepers for a private investigator, do you think it's possible at all that editors of your newspaper would not have known about these activities? Do you think it's remotely possible?
I can't say that because of the police inquiries and I presume coming judicial proceedings. That's all I can tell you, except it was my understanding, I better not say it, but it was my understanding that Mr. Myler was appointed there by Mr. Hinton to find out what the hell was going on, and that he commissioned that Harbottle and Lewis inquiry. Now, that is my understanding of it. I cannot swear to the accuracy of it.
Thank you.
I am going to appeal for brevity because we've been going for 2 hours now. Alan Keane.
Please, as brief as I can. To James Murdoch, what we'd like to know is, it's a mystery to us how Sunday newspapers are run. I'm very familiar with the engineering industry. Could you try and paint a picture of a week's operation at News of the World? What period were you closely involved controlling the News of the World?
My involvement in the business was overseeing the region of Europe and Asia. Just to be clear, in 2008, starting in the middle of December in 2007, I was chief executive for Europe and Asia, our European television business, our Asian television business, as well as our UK publishing business. Yeah. One title of which is the News of the World. So I can't say that I was ever intimately involved with the workings of the News of the World.
Yeah. So what results would come to you, presumably within the 7 days after publication? Presumably the sales, the advertising income, and you judge the newspaper on the profitability week by week, presumably. I know that Rupert Murdoch is far removed from that, but when you were in close...
I certainly get that.
But yeah, you would get that always.
Yeah. I mean, these are enterprises, and sales and advertising figures and personnel numbers and all of those things are relevant. Managers look at those things.
We understand from questions that have been answered already that when it comes to legal issues, settlement of claims, that's taken outside from the day-to-day management of the newspaper. That's right, isn't it?
Each group of companies or titles will have their own legal executives who will deal with things like libel and other things that will try to check that something doesn't go into the paper that's going to be wrong, etc. Sometimes that's right, sometimes it's wrong, but each has its own legal resource, and the managing editor's office is very involved in those things, as well as the counsel's office in the newspapers.
Yeah. So the editor of the News of the World.
To give you an example of my son's typical week. It would well have been, a day in Munich, or a day or in Sky Italia, where he had a very particularly difficult situation with a particularly tricky competitor, if I may say so. He had a lot on his plate.
I leave some of the more mundane issues then. It came clear from the first couple of questions to you, Rupert Murdoch, that you've been kept in the dark quite a bit on some of these real serious issues. Is there no...
Nobody's kept me in the dark. I may have been lax in not asking more, but it was such a tiny part of our business.
I understand that, but obviously we've come to this point he wouldn't be here if it wasn't extremely serious.
It's become extremely serious.
Is there no written rules that certain things have to be reported straight to the very top? It sounds if there are no such rules. It's
anything
left
that's
to the
seen as
trust
a crisis.
It's left to the trust of.
Anything that's seen as a crisis comes to me.
Mr. Keane, may I? I think it's important to know that there's a difference between being kept in the dark and a company that's a large company, the management of which is delegated to managers of different companies within the group and so on and so forth. And I think to suggest that that my father or myself were kept in the dark is a different thing from saying that actually the management and the running of these businesses is often delegated either to a chief executive of a different company, or an editor, or a managing editor, or an editorial floor, and decision-making has to be there. There are thresholds of materiality, if you will, whereby things have to move upstream. So something has to be brought to the attention. From a financial threshold point of view, I think we addressed that earlier with respect to the settlement, out-of-court settlement with Mr. Taylor. But also from the standpoint of things like alleged criminality, violations of our own code of conduct, things like that. Those are things that are the company's internal audit function, as well as the audit committee, as well as the senior executives of the committee, are expected to be made aware of, as they were in the case of the criminal prosecutions in 2007.
But you know, whatever efforts were made, whatever rules there were, you know, we've reached. News International has reached a crisis point, otherwise you wouldn't be here today and News of the World wouldn't have been closed. You know, who really is responsible? Who do you hold responsible for that failure? If you know, you're saying that people should have told you, but or you know, you're really saying just now, not that they should have told you, but you know, you let them get on and manage it.
No.
But they should have told you, shouldn't they? What's going wrong?
Mr. Keane, it's a good question, but I think it's not to say that we're saying, and I'm not saying that somebody should have told me. To my knowledge, certain things were not known. And when new information came to light, with respect to my knowledge of these events and to the understanding that when new information came to light, the company acted on it. And the company acted on it in a right and proper way as best the company could. But it's difficult to say that the company should have been told something if it's not known that a thing was a known fact to be told. Now, I've been asked today that, you know, about what other people knew when, and I can only rest on what they have told me or that what they have told you in previous hearings, and I understand completely your frustration about this. You can imagine my own frustration in 2010 when the civil litigation came to a point where these things came out, and to suddenly realize that actually the pushback or the denial of the veracity of allegations that had been made earlier, particularly in 2009, had been too strong. And that's a matter of real regret, because all the facts were not known when that was done. And that is a matter of deep regret, and it is why we're here today with you, trying to be as transparent as we possibly can.
I suppose this is really a rhetorical question, because I'm sure your answer will be what I expect, but it's admirable, the fact that you've had such long-term employees who become friends, very close friends, I'm sure, over the years. And Mr. Rupert explained that with his determination to look after Rebecca Brooks. So it's admirable, but there was a lot of criticism at the time that this isn't a criticism, James, of your ability, but there was criticism in the financial press that it was nepotism to a point. In retrospect, that's why I say it's a rhetorical question. I know what the answer will be. But do you regret, Mr. Rupert, that it has become really a family organisation?
Let me just go back over this. When the job became available of head of BSkyB, several people applied, including my son. They passed through all sorts of, not just board committees, but outside experts, etc., who made the conclusion that he was the right person. The press all had a field day. When he left to go to, when I promoted him to take charge of much wider responsibilities, we had calls from all the big shareholders, I say all, many big shareholders, saying it was a terrible thing to take him away because he had done such a great job.
Yeah, I said I wasn't disputing the ability of James, but the fact that you didn't know about so many of these criminal activities that went on, do you not think that was made more likely because of the sort of family history? I don't just mean James here, I'm talking about people who weren't direct members of your family but became friends, and it's admirable. But
no.
You don't think that's had any
I don't think so. I don't think Mr.
mismanagement, because it has been mismanaged.
I don't think Mr. Hinton misled me for a minute, but you must find out for yourself and make your own conclusion. Other people who gave the same evidence may well have been misleading you, but he certainly did not know of anything there.
Thank you very much.
I've got two more members. Damien Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I address my questions to the hearing, I just have to make a short declaration of my own, which is something I've previously declared to the committee, which is just say that my wife is an employee of a company called Edelman, which has been engaged by News Corporation. She's never worked on this account and has no access to the information relating to it, but I just want to share that with you before asking any questions. Mr. Rupert Murdoch, you said earlier on that we live in a transparent society. Do you think it's right that people in public life can expect total privacy in a society like that?
No.
And where do you think the limits of that lie? I noticed in the Watergate investigation, for example, personal banking and phone records were used, belonged to one of the witnesses that were relevant to that investigation. And so to what extent do you think the use of confidential private information, even phone records, even phone hacking, is permissible in the pursuit of a news story?
Oh, I think phone hacking is something quite different. But I do believe that investigative journalism, particularly competitive, does lead to a more transparent and open society, inconvenient though that may be to many people. And I think we are a better, and I think an open.